Welcome back to the Emily Show. This week, we are going to be getting into week 7 of the Karen Read case, and we have to talk about the Michael Proctor problem because on Friday, it became a huge and glaring issue. So we're going to talk a bit about what is going on with Michael Proctor and what's going to happen in court this week in the Karen Read case, plus some quick updates on other cases we've been following, including Tom Girardi, the Chrisleys, and the Diddy trial. So we should just get into it. I'm legal analyst Emily D. Baker, yes, also a lawyer, and this is The Emily Show. I break down the pop culture, entertainment, and high-profile cases that we're all talking about. I know you want the facts, so let's get into it. First, a huge thank you to all the law nerds who are making the case briefs the go-to place for trial summaries. It has been so nice to see in the comments how much you appreciate the case briefs, especially if there is a witness who you have just noped out on, or if you are busy, or you live in Australia and it is way too hard to watch trial day in and day out due to the timing differences, and the case briefs are keeping you in the loop. That was our goal. And as we go forward in trial coverage to the rest of the trials in 2025 and beyond, the case briefs will be there for you. I'm glad it has been such a help. Thank you so much. And for everyone who tunes into the Monday show and is just waiting to hear that the Karen Read trial is done, I know we've got a few more weeks though before we get to the end of this case, but the defense did say that they should be about a week to a week and a half, and they have just gotten started. So with factoring in the Commonwealth's rebuttal, we probably have another 2 weeks before this case goes to the jury for deliberation. And then how long they deliberate is up to them. But we have some updates on the other cases that I've also been talking about, including the Diddy case. This week, prosecutors got in more to putting on some of those that worked with Diddy. And yes, he is charged with a racketeering conspiracy, which requires a criminal enterprise, amongst other conspiracies, and he is the only one charged. So I'm not surprised that we're starting to see employees, and we're going to hear more about some witnesses, I'm sure, that have been offered immunity to testify. And during the testimony this week, the defense asked one of those witnesses a question that I don't think they knew the answer to, which was, did you ever commit any crimes while working for Diddy? And the witness was like, yes. So as we're looking at these RICO charges and getting to the heart of whether or not Bad Boy Records was operating to Diddy as a criminal enterprise, whether employees at Bad Boy or employees of Diddy were helping him cover things up or perpetrate other crimes, including that Molotov cocktail in Kid Cudi's car, those things go heavily to the RICO charges in addition to the sex trafficking charges. And we saw Mia, who is testifying under a pseudonym, one of Diddy's former assistants, testify this week, not only about her own horrific experiences with Diddy, but the things that she witnessed that were done to Cassie. So we are now hearing from those that witnessed all of this going on. And amongst all of the heartbreaking testimony, how isolated and trapped the victims of Diddy felt is coming across, I think, in a very big way in all of this testimony, that they felt that he was above the law, that there was no way to get away from him. And how many other people saw the way that Diddy was treating Cassie and others and did nothing to intercede, did nothing to step in, and did nothing to stop him. Mia testified that she never went to law enforcement because she thought that Diddy was above the law, and then talked about getting pulled over for speeding. And the officer that pulled her over was talking to her and was like, you're speeding. She's like, I'm late. My boss is, expecting me and I've got to get there. And of course, I am paraphrasing that testimony. And the officer asked, well, yeah, right, but you're speeding. And she said, no, my boss is Diddy. And she testified that that was the only time she had ever name dropped Diddy. And the officer's face lit up and was like, I love Diddy. Get him on the phone. I don't believe you. And Mia did. She called Diddy, and Diddy got on the phone with this officer, and the officer was like, oh my God, Puff Daddy, I love you, and was just effusing over being on the phone with Diddy. And at that point, Mia testified that it solidified for her that even if she went to law enforcement, this was the reaction she was going to get, that people were going to believe anything Diddy said and not her. And again, we have seen testimony in this trial of other celebrities witness things going on. Though this week we did see that one of Prince's security guards stepped in when Diddy was getting violent. But so often the testimony is that others saw what was happening and did nothing, or discouraged the victims from going forward and saying this is part of the life. and this is what it is. So the evidence is coming in, I think, in a very strong way for the prosecution, but I'm not surprised by that. They spent quite a lot of time putting this case together even before they raided Diddy's apartment. They have tons of photos and videos and lots of testimony that corroborates. And I don't think in this case, the jury is going to discount the immunity deals the way we might see in some trials, because we are looking at Diddy being the tip of the spear in this and the other employees also having some level of fear of Diddy. So even though they were carrying out things on his behalf and getting immunity because they are not being prosecuted for those things, I don't think a jury will hold it against them the way we see some other juries hold immunity deals against those that testify. So as this case continues on, the judge has really been pushing on getting this case to the jury before 4th of July. And while we can't see this case play out on stream or in audio, from all the reports I'm reading for courts, Judge Submaranian is leaning into these attorneys stronger than most judges, and that's because it is federal court. But we've seen the judge saying, can you be done with this witness by the end of the day? Can you be done with your cross in an hour? And so though that becomes really obvious as we were watching the Karen Reed case, it is playing out in an even stronger way in the Diddy case in federal court. In the Karen Reed case, we hear the judge say, I'm not rushing you, I'm just trying to get a sense of how much longer. In this case, Judge Submaranian is like, how long are you going to be? Are we wrapping this up now? We're keeping this trial on track. So it is pushing forward. I wonder if in the weeks to come, we will see the defense pushing back on that a bit more, but this is not unusual for federal court that the judges are like, you gave us a time estimate, let's go. Emily, did you ever practice in federal court? No, I have been in federal court. I have done things with the feds as a state level prosecutor, but no. Emily, how long are you going to be? I don't know. I'm completely time blind. I can't tell you how long I'm going to be. That would be miserable. But most attorneys are very good at estimating how long they are going to take in their questioning, unless the witness fights with them on every single question like we saw last week in the Karen Reed case, but that's a different situation. Thank you to today's sponsor, Honeylove, because not only do they make my favorite sleepwear ever, but they're also making sure that you are more comfortable in your bras and shapewear. Whether you have events that you are planning for, or you just want to be more comfortable this summer while traveling or doing all the normal life things you have to do, heavy, hot, bulky underpinnings are not where it's at. It is all about staying cool. Honeylove's signature support comes from smart design, not stiff wires or bulky padding. It's all the shape and hold you want without any of the stuff that you don't. And once you try it, you'll honestly forget that you're even wearing it. I know that for me, especially when traveling, the last thing I want to be doing is tugging at my bra. And I'm going to be taking my Honeylove with me. 1, because I can't sleep without my sleepwear, and 2, because it is the most comfortable to travel in. So treat yourself to the most comfortable and innovative bras on the market and get 20% off while doing it. So head to honeylove.com/lawnerd. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off at honeylove.com/lawnerd. And if they ask where you found them, be sure to let them know the Emily Show sent you. It's time to experience the new standard in bras with Honeylove. Let's get back to today's episode. Speaking of federal court, we need to talk about Tom Girardi. If you recognize the name and don't recognize the case, I don't blame you, but you might not be a Housewives fan, and I'm not judging. I'm a massive reality TV fan. Tom Girardi married, well, estranged now because the divorce has been pending since 2020, but married to Erica Girardi, who is on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. We saw him on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills a number of seasons. Erica wrote a book about their life together, but if you live in Los Angeles, you've probably heard the name because he was a very high-profile plaintiff's attorney. And you might also have heard his name in connection with the Aaron Brockovich case. He is a high-profile plaintiff's attorney who made friends with not only those at the state bar, but the mayor, the governor, the head of LAPD, the head of the LA Sheriff's Department, and everyone else. It was money, 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 power, and influence. Well, he is still pending sentencing after his conviction in Los Angeles for stealing from his clients. I've been covering this case since before the bankruptcy, as all of the cards started to crumble, because it is one of the most inexplicable and inexcusable things I have ever seen. But he was supposed to be sentenced in May. That sentencing was put over because he was in the hospital. The reports had something to do with liver malfunction, but all of the records regarding Tom Girardi's hospitalization are sealed. This is after he was sent out to federal prisons for an evaluation about where he will be housed, which means the judge is definitely considering a custodial sentence, not a, oh, you're on probation and monitoring sentence. But they were evaluating him for whether or not he would be suitable for the prison system or he would need to be housed in a medical facility. Remember, Tom Girardi is 85 years old, so where to house him is a big factor in his sentencing, and his age and relative health are also a factor in the decision of prosecutors in Illinois to drop the case that they were pursuing there. And based on his conviction in California, they are not going to be further pursuing the indictment against him in Illinois, which was specifically related to the Lion Air case that we have talked so much about in other content on the Emily Show podcast. So when will Tom Girardi be sentenced? Well, right now it is scheduled for June 3rd. We will see if anything happens, but follow along with me on the Law Nerd app and socials. When we know what that sentence is, I will be sure to share it with you. And speaking of prison sentences, we need to talk about the Chrisleys. You may recognize the name Todd and Julie Chrisley from their TV show Chrisley Knows Best, or from my coverage of their prosecution in federal court in Georgia that was going on at the same time as the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. And of course, federal court, no streaming, no audio, no nothing. As that case went into appeals, I was covering some of the appeals because it was apparent to me that particularly the testimony of the IRS agent saying that the Chrisleys hadn't paid the taxes that they were particularly discussing, that they had in fact paid those taxes. There were also some pretty big issues with search warrants and information that one judge had excluded under Fruit of the Poisonous Tree, the other judge had let in. That was all going up on appeal. Julie Chrisley had actually won part of her appeal to be resentenced, and the judge was still just like, yeah, I'm resentencing you to the same thing. This case has had a lot of legal concerns for me since the beginning as I watched it all unfold, but they were convicted and sentenced for crimes including tax evasion and bank fraud. Todd Chrisley was sentenced to 12 years. Julie Chrisley was sentenced to 7 years and then resentenced to 7 years after the Court of Appeals told the judge to resentence, and the judge was like, yeah, sure, okay, we'll resentence on a different basis, but also to 7 years. Both of them were pardoned by President Trump and released after spending 2.5 years in federal prison. And we promptly saw Todd Chrisley and his daughter Savannah Chrisley, who has an incredibly popular podcast that you may be familiar with, discussing the fact that this entire journey is going to be documented for a new reality TV show. And I imagine we will be hearing more about the behind the scenes of that prosecution, more questions about who was granted immunity to testify in that case, and more about the process of a pardon and what the experience in prison was like. Because from what Savannah has shared from her conversations with both Todd and Julie, they both have a lot to say about what they saw go down in prison. And I am going to be interested to see the discussion of their trial and the behind the scenes of their trial, because we've seen their attorney talk about it a bit. I've covered the appeals, but I'm interested to hear it from them. So they have now been released from federal prison, and I'm interested to see the behind the scenes of that experience while their appeals were pending, while they were in prison. And we will see how that all shakes out, because it's going to be coming, I think, to Lifetime in pretty short order. So we will all be able to watch along if you are so inclined. I still find the misrepresentation of, no, those taxes weren't paid, when objectively they were, wild. It's just wild to me. And speaking of things that are wild, we have to talk about Trooper Michael Proctor. Oh, the Michael Proctor problem in the Karen Reed retrial. For those of you that did not watch the first Karen Reed case, then you do not know what a can of worms Michael Proctor is. He is the now terminated former lead investigator in the Karen Reed case. Yes, they want to call him the case agent or whatever. He was the lead investigator. His hands were in everything in this investigation, and we've seen that thoroughly throughout the cross-examinations in the prosecution's case in chief. But who is going to call Michael Proctor to the stand? And I have said throughout this trial, I think it is going to be a staring contest to see who blinks first. And the prosecution rested their case after 6 weeks and did not call Michael Proctor. We have heard in opening what Michael Proctor has said and done from the defense. We have heard that he is former trooper Proctor. We have heard some vague things about him, but the jury has not heard from him, and they have not heard the worst of his text messages, which are incredibly bad. Not only are they insulting, but they also go to bias and a early determination made in this investigation. On Friday at the end of court, and if you've seen the case brief that we'll link, we go through that more fulsomely, but on Friday at the end of court, the attorneys were arguing over one of Michael Proctor's friends or former friends that was on this text thread to authenticate it. And they were arguing over whether you can authenticate the document, meaning is this a real representation of the text messages that it purports to be, and admissibility. How do you get this into evidence as to Michael Proctor's statements without calling Michael Proctor? The court has not ruled on that yet as of the recording of this, and might rule by Monday morning or might rule when she takes the bench Monday morning in trial. But the issue is twofold: whether they can be authenticated and then admissibility. How do you get Proctor's text messages in evidence and through what witness if you don't call Michael Proctor? Some of those texts, I think, are being offered for the truth of the matter. The defense argued that some of them are not hearsay. They're not being offered for the truth, especially the insults to Karen Reed. They are not trying to prove that she is the names that Proctor called her. But when it comes to texts like the homeowner's going to catch some shit, nope, the homeowner's a Boston cop too, those things I think they are trying to show, well, look, he knew at the beginning he wasn't going to investigate anyone else because they were cops too. Those things are being offered to prove what they say. So those do become hearsay. So this issue of the text messages is a bit more nuanced, different than Karen Reed's own statements because she's a party opponent. We haven't heard any of the parties argue that Michael Proctor is an unavailable witness, which would be different. It seems that we are in this staring contest of who's going to call him. And Boston 25 News is reporting that after court on Friday, May 30th, attorney Yannetti actually said to the media that he is not calling Michael Proctor. We need to take a look at that real quick because yes, there is a gag order in this case, but I have not had issue in the past with Boston 25's reporting. So this is what they're reporting, but there is a gag order in this case. They are reporting that on the way out of court, Reed's lawyer, David Yannetti, said it was a quote unquote team decision to not have Proctor take the stand. Instead, the defense plans to use people Proctor messaged as a way to introduce his crude text in the trial. Special prosecutor Hank Brennan fought to keep the text out of the retrial altogether. Quote, it would be distracting, confusing to the jury, and it could be unfair to either side because it would lead to arguments over what it means without a factual basis, Brennan said. And then from Yannetti, they're quoting from the hearing, I think that's the whole impetus of this objection, so that we will call a witness they do not have confidence in to call themselves. It's unheard of in a murder case that you don't call the lead investigator, and it is incredibly unusual, but you also don't have many cases going to trial where the lead investigator has been fired after a thorough hearing across multiple days due to their investigation in the case that's being tried. That is also unheard of. So not only are we seeing it reported, but we're seeing Yannetti say it himself in court. Let's take a look at what he said one more time.
And in conclusion, Your Honor, he complains that we have not called Michael Proctor. I think that's the whole impetus for this objection, so that we will call a witness that they do not have confidence in to call themselves. It's unheard of in a murder case that you don't call the lead investigator, but that's what's happened in this case. We should not be forced to call Michael Proctor so that Mr. Brennan can then cross-examine him and lead him through basically his entire closing argument. He is entitled to call Mr. Proctor in rebuttal. He has every right to call Mr. Proctor again. I would rest on that. Thank you.
Okay.
So who, if anyone, is going to call Michael Proctor? And we seem to have some confirmation that the defense does not intend to call Michael Proctor. I wonder if that will change based on the court's ruling. He's on the defense witness list. No one has said he is unavailable as a witness to testify. I would suspect that he's under subpoena based on being on the defense witness list. And we didn't hear Hank Brennan say he's not even under subpoena in his argument. So I think Monday, we will see more argument over this in court. And of course, Monday is when this publishes. So once you see this, just hop on over to the live stream so we can all see what happens together. Make sure you have the Law Nerd app so you don't miss a thing, because we're all waiting to see who's going to call Proctor. I think the defense needs those texts in, and I'm not sure that the court is going to allow all those texts in through one of Proctor's friends. Now, maybe they will bring the friend that Proctor's responding to, but they're not going to be able to ask the friend, what did Proctor think about the investigation? What did Proctor feel about this? They're not going to be able to get to state of mind of Michael Proctor through the friends. They might be able to ask the friend, why did you respond to this? Why did you say the homeowner's going to catch some shit too? Why did you say that? But they have to call the friends for that. So they might be able to get to some of those texts through some of the friends that are responding, but that's not the friend that we saw in voir dire Friday. And I think this is going to be a difficult fight with the court to bring all of those in, though the defense did say that the defense and prosecution have agreed to all but 3 of the text messages. I imagine the nope, homeowners of Boston Cop 2 is one of those text messages that the prosecution is arguing is hearsay. The insults and the name calling clearly are not hearsay and not offered for the truth. But if they go to state of mind, they're going to have to bring in Proctor to ask him about state of mind or try to argue it from just the text. I don't see Proctor as a witness that's going to hurt the defense, but we've heard from David Yannetti what their concern is. We don't want to call Proctor just so the prosecution can lead Proctor through their entire closing argument. You found this, you found this, you found this, you found this. But I don't think a jury is going to say, okay, well, Proctor sent some texts, but the investigation's fine. I think the texts are too damning for that. But it seems that everyone's trying to sidestep around the Proctor problem. Are we actually going to get to the end of this retrial without anyone calling Trooper Proctor? I understand it when it comes to Brian Higgins. I understand not calling everyone else that was in the house. I think the defense has a lot of room to argue. The Commonwealth didn't show you everything. But I think that the Proctor texts are so strong for the defense that it would be very surprising to leave them out. However, they have a ton of very smart attorneys who know this case incredibly well. So how this plays out, we will see. And I also wonder if this is part of the game of chicken that's going on, where the defense is like, we're not going to call him, we're not going to call him, and then wham, just Trooper Proctor on the stand. Who knows? But you're not going to want to miss a minute of trial, so make sure that you have the Law Nerd app, because that's going to be the question that's going to loom through the rest of the defense case. When and if they call Trooper Proctor, and is it a good decision to not call Trooper Proctor if those text messages come in through others? If those text messages don't come in through others, is the defense then forced to call Proctor to get those text messages in? Because I think the jury needs to hear them, and I imagine that the defense feels the same way. And the prosecution's like, go ahead, you call him then. Because the best outcome for the prosecution is that the defense calls Trooper Proctor, and then they get to cross-examine Proctor and can say, yeah, you got fired for all this, didn't you? But you were with Trooper Buchanan when you did this, and you were with Trooper Buchanan when you did that, and there was this other trooper there when you did all those things. You got fired for these texts, but all these other troopers were around when you did everything else. And I think that's what the prosecution wants, because then they can say to the jury, we didn't bring this trooper because we don't agree with what he did. He was fired. He was rightfully fired. He's the worst. But there were other troopers involved in this investigation, and he did not taint this investigation. That's the argument they want to be able to make. But the defense wants to be able to argue, look at what the prosecution hid from you. How dare they? They didn't show you everything in this case. And if they didn't show you everything in this case, how can you have confidence in a verdict? Because the prosecution hid the lead investigator from you. You didn't hear from Brian Higgins. You didn't hear from Brian Albert. And that might be the argument that they want to make. Let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of The Emily Show. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a law nerd. Take care of yourselves, and may the odds be ever in your favor. I will see you in court this week. Can't wait to see you in the chat. Bye. Thanks for joining me. If you enjoyed this episode and don't want to miss updates on your favorite cases, you're going to need the Law Nerd app at lawnerdapp.com. That way you can stay in the loop on the cases that matter most to you, and you never know when you're going to catch feelings for a new case. So make sure you get it for free on iOS and Android. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being a law nerd.